Welcome back to GPAI Paris Summit. Please, ladies and gentlemen, grab a seat as we're about to dive in the first afternoon of those 2 amazing days to dive into the latest development on artificial intelligence and the work of the amazing members and groups of the Global Partnership on AI, of course. We'll be live until 6 p.m. here at l'Institut France to review, of course, the ongoing works of lead experts, scientists, member governments of this global partnership. And to open this afternoon, how to foster and contribute to the responsible development, use, and governance of human-centered AI systems following the UN SDGs. Well, our next working group has brought together 35 experts from 20 countries to address the challenge of whatever is called responsible AI. We're definitely going to dive into this definition. And this group has focused actually on 2 major projects, which definitely sound aligned with the last headlines from the past few weeks. Responsible AI strategy for the environment and responsible AI for social media governance, one of my favorites here. I'll be joined by 4 amazing guests to dive into this question in a few seconds. And as we're all set, here with me in Paris, I have the great luck to be joined by Raja Shatila. You're the co-chair of Responsible Development, Use and Governance of AI at Sorbonne University in France. Dino Pedreschi, you're the professor of computer science at the University of Pisa, Italy, of course. And Nicolas Miaille, you're the co-founder and president of the Future Society from France. And of course, the one and only joining us live from Canada, Joshua Bengio, the co-chair of the Responsible Development, Use and Governance of AI, founder and scientific director at Mila in Canada. Of course, Joshua, you are co-moderating this very working group. Thank you very much to you 4 gentlemen for joining us. And to begin with, let's see an overview of the progress since the 2020 summit in Montreal and the selection maybe of the 2 projects lead this year. Joshua, for a general working group report, the stage and the mic is yours.
Well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here today, and the work we've been doing is very important. We're going to be presenting the progress of our working group. Raja, you want to take over?
Thank you. Thank you, Joshua. I'm very pleased to be here today, and welcome to everyone. We would like to present to you the work that the Responsible AI, for short, working group has achieved this year. As Marjorie said in the introduction, the mandate of our working group, maybe we can have the slides.
We'll definitely proceed with the slides.
The slides should be coming, I suppose. Yep. Never mind.
They are.
No, back up, please.
You're going to have them just right here, and they're definitely going to be.
Could you please back up to the first slide? Yep, perfect. So the mandate of our working group is to foster and contribute to the responsible development, and this is really important, development, use, and governance of human-centered AI. So whatever we do with AI, it's a responsible approach. And this is in congruence with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is also central to the whole GPAI work. The group is about 30 plus experts in the field of AI, and we, with Joshua, are very privileged to work with such a competent and motivated people. And these experts have reflected on a work plan for 2021, and we came up to try to use, develop, and understand how we can actually apply AI to different areas that are of interest. So climate change, for example, climate action is SDG 13, sorry. And the other topic on which we worked, but I will leave Yoshua introduce the topics, is related to justice and society. So, Yoshua?
Yes. So these two projects we'll be talking about today, they really demonstrate the necessity for the whole of society to respond to these challenges, and in particular governments. And that's why it's so important for the role of GPAI to carry the recommendations that we're putting forward. In many cases, for example, both climate change and social media, we're talking about fairly urgent priorities that need to be addressed globally in a coordinated way across countries. So you can move to the next slide. I don't see the slides, but so let me say a few words about the first project on climate change. It's providing an actionable roadmap on how AI technology can be developed responsibly to help fight climate change, which of course, this week especially, we all hopefully realize how important it is, and that we haven't been putting enough priority on this issue among our governments. But precisely, AI could be a tool to help accelerate that fight in many areas. And Raja and Nicola, who are here, have been co-leading this project and collaborated with the Center for AI and Climate, as well as the Climate Change AI group, to develop these recommendations. So these have been presented to the COP26, and we'll now hear more about them. So if you want to move to the next slide. Yes, thanks. So the second project focuses on developing an understanding of social media users' relationships with harmful content and aims at developing methods allowing external stakeholders, so we're talking about governments and citizens group, to work together with social media companies and study the effects of recommender systems in this context of harmful online content. The project has been initiated with New Zealand as a case study that could be scaled in the future, hopefully, and it builds upon the shared objectives shared by governments and industry in the Christchurch call. This project is co-led by Alistair Knott, Kate Hanna, and Dino Pereski, who is here. Raja?
Yes, and of course, as it's common with AI, which is quite transversal, there are links between these two projects because, for example, misinformation is widely used to spread wrong, fake news about climate change and the reasons of climate change. But before we move to present these projects, I would like to inform you that this working group is going to change a little bit in its composition because Yoshua is still member of the group, but he won't co-lead it for the next phase. I will be co-chairing it with Catherine Régis from Catherine. There should be a slide also showing her. Catherine is a professor of law at the University of Montreal and is a Canada Research Chair in Health, Law and Policy. And she will bring a wealth of expertise to the working group to work on AI governance specifically, and all the topics related also to law aspects. So I'm very excited to be working with her for the next period. But of course, I would like to thank Joshua. A big thank to Joshua, actually. It was really an honor to work with you, Joshua, for this past period.
Thank you.
And well, it's not over. You won't be co-chairing, but you're still a member of the group. So I think we will continue to interact, and we will be very much in need of your wisdom and your competence. Now, let me now hand the floor to the co-lead of the two projects. Joshua introduced the projects and the persons, and the members of this project were not only the co-leads, of course, because in each case there were experts that we actually invited to participate in a steering committee, and I would like to thank them very much in their active participation in the steering committee of the project. And specifically also, we have had two external partners for the climate action project. They were mentioned by Joshua, CCAI and CIIC, and they have accomplished a fantastic work that Nico, to start with, is going to present as a co-lead of the RAISE project, Responsible AI Strategy for the Environment. Nico?
Thank you, Raja, and hi everyone. Let me also express my gratitude to Joshua for his leadership and support in really placing at the core of the agenda of our work this pressing question of climate change and the need to act upon it. Let me also extend words of thanks and gratitude to SEMIA, and particularly to its outgoing director, Jacques Rajotte, for the unyielding support and hard work to support us. So thank you very much. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right. In a summary, what we've tried to be accomplishing with Project RAISE, which stands for Responsible AI Strategy for the Environment, starting with the first step now, this year, focused on climate action, has been to bring and really leverage the global partnership on AI to create an international coalition led by experts to put together a first general framework in terms of what government action can look like to really impact industry and society in terms of helping leverage responsibly AI for climate action. Why? Well, there is a lack of understanding of the potential in terms of opportunities and in terms of risk. There's a tremendous lack of capacity in mobilizing the resources and the tools that Francis Bach this morning reminded us of, that our colleagues from the previous panel that looked at Earth observation mentioned. So there's a lack of understanding, there is a lack of capacity, and there is also, frankly speaking, a lack of a framework of what responsible AI means for climate action, both in the case of upholding the best from our democratic values and our respect for equality and freedom, but also looking at what responsibility from environmental impact means from AI. We saw from Francis' presentation this morning that there are big questions being raised there. We know that it's a deeply interdisciplinary program, and so we decided to not work together and to try and anchor our work within the broader international efforts being led around that with the IPCC, with the UNEP, with the European Commission, with the UNFCCC, and really try and, as I said, bring an international coalition that could be interested in the kind of general framework that we could put together. And we have released and presented at the COP a first preliminary version of this report, and we're going to expand. Now, that report, and I'm going to yield the floor to our delivery partners, CCI and CAC, whom I also want to congratulate and thank for their hard work. But basically, it looks like a bouquet of 49 recommendations that we want to render more specific, more granular, and move towards actionability. But they look like things such as, how do we create data sharing frameworks, protocols, and platforms to accelerate the rise of digital twins for the planet, for example? Or what capacity building efforts are required both in regulated industries to really accelerate the deployment of new business model and new technologies? And how can we help governments lead the way in rendering AI more responsible from carbon emission? That's what it's looking like. And because we know there is a lack of basic understanding of what AI for climate action means, we back this up with the development of a small booklet of 10 use cases to render things practical when we engage with policymakers, when we engage with industry, to really create a bit of a movement to embark this community towards more and more action, collaborating with the OECD, with UNEP and others. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I also want to thank the work of our colleague Marta, who has been a very active member of the steering committee of the group, who is going to become also one of the co-leads of the project moving forward. So thanks a lot, Marta, for your hard work. Let me know, next slide, please. I will yield the floor to Peter from the Center for Air and Climate to give a bit of a quick overview of what the reports look like. If you can start the first video, that would be great. Because they couldn't be with us today, either physically or virtually. It's going to be a quick 3 minutes video, and then we'll hear from Priya to focus on the use cases.
Hi, I'm Pete Cluttenbrock, one of the co-authors in this report and one of the co-founders of the Centre for AI and Climate, which was one of the 2 delivery partners of this particular report, together with Climate Change AI. We had 2 objectives for this report. One was to offer policymakers concrete examples for how AI is already supporting the transition to net zero and climate resilience. And the second was to offer governments a playbook for how they can support this space and unlock the potential this technology offers. The report covers a range of areas that governments need to consider action on to support this space. We dive into detail on data and digital infrastructure, where we talk about data collection, data access, data standards, licenses, data sharing, all in the context of climate change. One recommendation I'd pull out here is that we think governments should consider developing data task forces to assess the data landscape in all climate-relevant sectors, whether it's energy or transport or land use. Research and innovation funding is one of the key levers that governments have at their disposal when it comes to supporting this work. A key challenge here is there is often funding provision for AI and for climate, but limited funding that combines the two. We need to join them up. Thirdly, deployment and systems integration. Some of the sectors that we care about most when it comes to climate change are some of the most heavily regulated with monopoly incumbents. So whether it's energy or transport or land use, often the incentives in these sectors are set as much in regulation and legislation as by the market itself. A key challenge here is that the incentives for incumbents in these sectors aren't always aligned with innovators, and a key recommendation is to ensure that we work with incumbents, regulators and innovators to develop digital innovation pathways so that we can build digital innovation ecosystems around climate critical sectors. Fourthly, reducing AI's own emissions. So AI has an emissions profile associated with it and, like all sectors, needs to achieve net zero. Emissions come from a range of sources, including direct energy use from compute, use of AI by emissions intensive sectors such as the fossil fuel industry, and wider societal impacts. We then have a range of cross-cutting themes. Everything needs to be viewed through the lens of responsible AI. That includes the core responsible AI principles, but also goes further and looks at making sure that we don't pitch AI in a techno-solutionist way when it comes to climate change. Capacity building is critical when it comes to this space. We need to be supporting the development of capacity throughout the sectors that we care about when it comes to climate change to make sure they have the capacity needed to deliver AI solutions. International collaboration, there is huge potential to support international collaboration because many of the challenges we have are both cross-border and common across countries. And finally, we need to be measuring the impact of what we're doing when it comes to all of this work. I'm going to hand over now to Priya, who's going to talk about a couple of use cases for this work.
Well, thank you, Pete. And we can go to the next video to hear from Priya, who's going to focus on concrete use cases from different countries that represent examples of international coalition trying to implement these kind of recommendations and serve as a, I would say, guiding light towards that trajectory. So can we have the second video? Priya Danti from Climate Change AI.
Hi everyone! My name is Priya Donti, and I'm one of the other lead authors on the report. I'm a co-founder and chair of Climate Change AI and a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University. Now that Pete has outlined the structure of the report, we wanted to dive into a couple of examples and how they relate to some of the recommendations we make for policymakers. These examples are just 2 of the 13 case studies we describe in detail in the report. In regulated sectors like the electric power industry, AI tools are often held back by a lack of data or simulation environments, or a lack of innovation pathways from proof of concept to scalable deployment. One project that's explicitly addressing this challenge is the Learning to Run a Power Network competition, which aims to take advantage of the huge opportunities to use AI algorithms to dynamically optimize power grids, which can better help integrate renewables. The project is led by RTE, the French transmission system operator, in collaboration with the system operators from the Netherlands and China, the Electric Power Research Institute in the US, and additional research partners. The close involvement of grid operators has made it possible for L2RPN to develop uniquely realistic simulation environments to validate the performance and reliability of AI algorithms, and this has laid the groundwork for scaling such methods across the industry. Our report details a number of recommendations relevant to enabling this kind of innovation across a range of problems and sectors. First, to facilitate the development of data collection systems and digital twins in highly regulated sectors and ensure their accessibility to a wide range of players. Second, to develop climate-relevant grand challenges for AI, as well as encouraging AI connections where relevant within existing climate grand challenges. And third, to foster digital innovation pathways within climate-relevant industries. The next example I want to highlight is Climate Trace. There are many AI applications where the goal is to inform policy, requiring tight integration with policymakers and policy processes. Climate Trace is a global initiative, including partners from the US, UK, India, and elsewhere, that has revolutionized the monitoring of greenhouse gas emissions, providing independent, trusted emissions estimates across countries and sectors to inform climate policy development. These estimates are obtained by taking a network of 300 satellites and 11,000 sensors combined with on-the-ground data, and then analyzing this information at scale using AI. To enable and grow initiatives like Climate Trace, we offer a number of recommendations in the report. First, developing AI literacy and upskilling programs, since projects like these involve close coordination across many sectors and stakeholders, and therefore require a shared understanding of the capabilities, pitfalls, and requirements of AI systems. Second, the coordinated development of standards for developing, deploying, evaluating, and maintaining AI for climate systems. And third, coordinated support for applications with broad public benefit that are not fully captured within traditional commercial incentive structures. There's an opportunity for international collaboration in helping launch and sustain other public interest applications, such as AI-enabled carbon stock estimation and deforestation monitoring.
Well, I think it gives you quite a general overview of where we're taking this. To conclude, a word about where we're taking this. Well, first, we know that to address responsible AI for the environment, we need to reconcile climate action and the preservation and biodiversity. If we don't bring the two together, it won't work on either side. We're seeing IPBES and IPCC collaborate. We want to work with them. We want to anchor this work and work with them, for example, on next generation simulation and modeling that could help trigger new solutions and pathways. We also want to put in place a framework towards impact planning and assessment. There is a lot of hype. We need to anchor ourselves around reality and sequencing to attract interest and mobilize investments. And last but not the least, and we think it's very much aligned with the spirit and the mandate of GPAI, I belong originally to the data governance working group. And I've been working with responsible AI, but we have a cross-working group project where we want to pilot the development of a climate action-oriented data trust to try and invent new ways to share high-resolution data, personal data that are quite risky to manipulate, but that if we are capable of manipulating, because of their high resolution, will open up new solution pathways. So once again, congratulations and thanks to delivery partners, to Joshua, to Raja, and to Semia for their support. And I yield the floor to Dino to hear from the fantastic work you've been doing.
Shall I proceed?
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm actually talking about this project, which is actually 3 related project that we've been pursuing. There is a more technical part of it, which is actually how to develop a method for working together social media companies to investigate whether their recommendation system move users towards harmful content. There is also a community consultation project that we're running, again, for the moment in New Zealand, about asking the citizens of a community what they perceive as harm online. And there's also a legal policy sub-project that it's somehow investigating the legal and policy basis to actually engage in this way with social media company, to take all the legitimate interests of stakeholders together in this story. I will mostly concentrate in the little time on the technical part, giving only glimpse on the other two. Why this focus on recommender system? The recommender system are those algorithms that deliver content to social media user feeds or timeline, that help us essentially navigate a deluge of potential content. So they're doing very useful work for social media users. And essentially they are AI systems. They are machine learning systems that learn somehow how to suggest content based on, in a personalized way to users, based on the user experience, the user engagement with the network. So that's precisely why they are so useful and why they are so also concernful in some sense. Scientists from many different disciplines actually have concerns on how recommendation systems learn, because of course there is a feedback loop between the recommender system that learn from the user activity what content to suggest to the user based on the preference that are inferred from the history, but also the other way around. The recommendation of the system will influence the user in future choices. We are in a dynamical system where there is a continuous learning and a continuous feedback situation. Now, the legitimate question is, can this kind of loop bring to instabilities, to, let's say, potentially dangerous pathways for users? We know from many different branches of science, from cognitive psychology, social sciences, that we show systematic bias in our selection of contents towards, for instance, moral emotion, negative sentiment contents that draw more our attention, towards political outgroups, topics that concern others or minorities, or bias toward false information or sensationalistic information. The point is, if the recommender system somehow reflect and amplify this bias, this could lead users in some potentially harmful direction. And look, the point is that even small influence could lead to big effects. That's something we should consider. I always like to make this example. If you are on a car driving on a straight road and your steering wheel has a slight, let's say, misalignment toward right, at any moment in time, this is negligible. You don't really care. But this is something that goes on. And if you eventually don't correct it, the car will go off-road. It will make an accident, right? So we need to monitor the process of accumulation. And that's why it's very legitimate to ask ourselves whether or not recommender system can lead towards harmful content. And actually, not necessarily always, but in which circumstances, in which situation, for which kind of topics, for which kind of countries or region in the world, for which kind of users. And there are plenty of theoretical models. I'm also a researcher in this area that somehow put this problematic problem forward. But of course, we need real work done on real data from real social networks. And most of studies conducted so far today are external to the companies. They're made on history of, for instance, many interaction of users with the platform, many posts, many tweets or whatever, and you try to reconstruct the behavior of different internet groups of users. Or you can make try to attract volunteers to provide their data. But all these methods have very, very strong limitation. No, the real problem, the biggest problem is actually to test a causal question. Do the recommender system have or not a certain effect? This is like asking whether a vaccine works, okay? The question, does this particular COVID-19 vaccine works? The only way to say yes or no is to organize a control trial, many users with a clear methodology, so you need to be inside the system. And I'm quickly going to the point, but to somehow show what we are designing and what we are about trying to do for real with a company is essentially do what social media company already made internally. They continuously do this kind of, let's say, causal experiments to verify different version of their recommender system, which ones work better than others, right? Typically with respect to many criteria, but essentially trying to maximize users' engagement and along different possible directions. That's precisely what we are about, what we have designed this month, what we have created a partnership to do it. It's to run an experiment of this sort, we call this a fact-finding exercise, with, in a specific place, which is New Zealand. New Zealand because there is the Christchurch core project that has, on the initiative of the New Zealand government, has involved all media companies to trying to counter terrorist and violent extremist content, or TVAC. So we will make reference to that kind of stream of work with an idea which is very precise. So use what the company already is using internally, but for a different purpose. For the purpose of somehow trying to understand what happens with respect to measures of users' engagement with harmful material. Yes, please.
I just wanted to make sure that you were heard loud and clear, so just put your mic a little bit under your chin so we're not losing one of your sentences. Yeah, wonderful.
Close.
Exactly,
okay.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Okay, sorry, thank you very much. The focus will be about, instead of trying what different form of recommender system create more engagement for users, we actually will ask which different version or different forms of recommendation system actually have an effect in driving users toward violent and extremistic content. Of course, this study is going co-design with the company, with a social media company, and a group of independent experts that is provided by GPAI. Essentially trying to ask this two big questions. Do recommendation systems have different impacts on the user relation towards harmful content, and in which circumstances this may happen? And do recommendation systems that maximize user engagement also run the risk of driving user towards harmful content? For the moment, we don't really have a clear-cut answer to this question. Essentially because most of the studies has been conducted internally to companies, and we know little actually about this. And what we are proposing is actually to use the scientific method and eventually publish the result of this fact-finding exercise according to scientific standards on open papers. Because first of all, we strongly believe that this method is safe both for the company, we can organize this kind of method without somehow infringing the company IP in any means, because we want to deliver transparency about the ethics of recommendation system. Not reveal the internals of the recommendation system itself. We don't really, we can take the recommendation system as a black box, essentially, but look what are its effects. And also, the method does not compromise at any meaningful sense the privacy of users of the social media company, because any let's say, confidential data will, of course, remain within the company, and only aggregated measures of user behavior will actually be published. We have very good hope for this to actually happen. There is a very good example, a very fresh one, coming from Twitter that has very recently posted on October 21st. An article that you see is actually entitled Algorithmic Amplification of Politics on Twitter, freely accessible, which exactly employs the kind of fact-finding exercise we have in mind to a different purpose, which is actually asking a different question, whether the recommendation system amplify the consumption of political content to users. And actually, it's a very interesting paper showing that it constructed essentially considering two different populations. A population that is subject to the ordinary company's recommender system, a normal operation, and another population that instead it's the personalization is switched off, and you simply receive the tweet on your timeline, simply the earlier, the latest tweet on top from the people, the accounts that you follow. No? So essentially it's like comparing a pure social influence, let's say, with social influence plus a personalized recommendation. No? And they actually discover that, yes, there is an amplification of the political content, systematic in all the different countries where they do the study, but they also find that certain kind of content is amplified more than other kind of content. Actually, the right-hand leaning content is more actually amplified than other contents. So this is essentially the ideas. As I said, we are about to start with one of the large companies and in partnership with New Zealand government, with an idea, which is use this case as, let's say, a first instance to be generalized to a methodology that can be applied in any country partnering with any social media company, and essentially dealing with also different kind of questions with respect to those that we focused during this first 6 months of the project. Very quickly, I want to say two things. First of all, say a big thank to the co-lead of this project, that are Alistair Knott of University of Otago, New Zealand, and Kate Hanna from University Auckland, again in New Zealand. For both of them, it's really the middle of the night, so it's like two or three in the night, so they will join later probably. The second thing is that we also have run in parallel, and in particular Kate Hanna has been following this stream of work. We have also run this community consultation project, which has a very clear-cut question again. And of course, there are general definitions. For instance, the Global Internet Forum on Counterterrorism has defined a notion of violent and extremistic content, and there is a multi-stakeholder work in trying to do this kind of definition as wide and encompassing as possible. But we also believe in our project that there is a regional dimension of what is harmful for what population that's really truly important. This can really be different in place to place, And what we are trying to develop in New Zealand is a project of consultation of the communities that are more subject of harm for a very, let's say, practical purpose, to understand, to learn from them in first place, but also to learn how to classify material that is truly harmful for them. And this could be a very important input for instance, for machine learning tools that can then help to automatically recognize such content and be paired with our project. Because of course, to monitor the tendency of user towards harmful content, we need a very good definition and a very good classification tool for harmful content. The key methods for this is structured meetings with these communities. So there is a structured procedure for actually gathering, auditing, and partnering with communities that it's going on. It has been slowed down by the pandemic, but it's actually going to start on large scale in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They call there a hui. A meeting is a hui, which is a Maori word for a constructive meeting, and that's what is going to happen next. I don't say nothing about the legal process because this would require a long time, but I really would like to refer the interested people to the other report specific on the legal and policy aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was a very detailed and amazing, report on the ongoing projects. Of course, we definitely dove into a little earlier this morning into how AI and climate change are related and how AI-powered tools can definitely make a change there. We probably want to focus on for the next few minutes in terms of question. If you do have some question, though, ladies and gentlemen here in this room, probably more on the social media part of it, because I'm pretty sure that it rings the bell for all of us here, especially in the awakening of Frances Hogan and the way she's definitely describing the methods of our ex-employer here. We have one question in the room that we're going to take, just up there. Yeah, if you can just light up the room, it's way easier for us to see it. Ma'am, please.
Thank you. I am aware of other research projects that have been conducted along the same lines. For example, from by the Mozilla Foundation, in which they audited the world's largest video platform, and they actually found out that 13% of the pre-roll videos conflict their own community guidelines. Anyway, my question is, there's been numerous research projects in which we have been found out that social media delivers radicalized content and takes people into very dark paths. My question is, why every sector in the world takes the legacy systems off the market? Because I don't see many Trabants driving along the autobahns now. And why do we still let companies run algorithms of recommendation, which are pretty old, like collaborative filtering is from 1998? Why do we allow them to still have very outdated, not really delivering what recommendations should be? Why do we allow that?
Very good question indeed. Dino, do you want to take it? So the question is more about, I mean, if I can wrap it up, probably is also the question about how do we let those big tech still run algorithms that are actually fed with data that are corrupted and biased in the first place, and how can probably institution initiatives such as GPAI make a difference out there? Can they be, can they actually help citizens and users, because in the end we're users and citizens at the same time, to see a little better path out there when it comes to social media. So Dino, do you want to take the answer?
Thank you. First of all, it's a very good question. But the point is that I believe that companies continues to use algorithms that work in the sense they measure they work. No? If it's somehow a technology that maybe in some cases is old-fashioned and other cases is actually not so old-fashioned, it's actually providing more engagement to users. they essentially will continue to do so unless there is a kind of, let's say, governance system that what we're trying to push with, that somehow bring into the picture other interests, other legitimate interests of other stakeholders, like, people, governments, regulators, that somehow put into the picture the necessity of having different criteria to optimize. So remember that in the end, a lot, not all artificial intelligence, but the machine learning is essentially optimization, try to optimize a criterion. And if in that criterion you only somehow put one specific goal instead of many others, you will end up in maximizing that specific corner of the issue and simply not consider the others. And that's, I believe, why it is important, first of all, to understand what's going on now, what are the likely effect that we might severely underestimate in this area, and second, what can be done together to bring a better way of cultivating the public opinion and our democracies. I don't know if I responded to you.
Do you want to follow up with the question?
Well, it's just that every sector, especially consumer goods, have been forced to adapt to the demands of each decade. And precisely now, we're in the human-centric decade. So, for example, if you buy a tin opener, it will be 1,000% safe. Not in 1992. That was not the demand. So rather than if the algorithms work or not, are they working according to the new demands of a human-centric society, which fundamentally protects people? And the answer is no. So my question again was, why don't we take them off the market like legacy? Like, this is why we don't go around with hair dryers from 82. They've been taken off the market because they can blow up in flames, etc., etc. That was my question.
Which is very good. Nicola, do you want to address it?
I think you got a point here in terms of defining what GPAI can do in that spirit. Will GPAI define the legislation? No. It does not have a normative mandate. But can GPAI help define what state-of-the-art represents and pathways to standardization that can bring 20, 40 countries around upholding the democratic order and freedom of expression? Yes, it can. And I think that what Dino, Alistair, and Kate are about to do is moving and starting a pathway to help define what we mean by state-of-the-art. This is something we can do, something that government, in a way, are expecting from us, that can really inform with practical tools the, in a way, operationalization of these great AI ethics principles. This is, I think, a very important potential for GPAI.
But if I may jump in with a follow-up really quick, because we literally have only 5 minutes left on this session. What would it work now? I mean, literally, the Christchurch call was, I can definitely remember and remind the very time Yassina Ardern and Emmanuel Macron were at the Élysée signing the Christchurch call. It was in 2019. And you had all the Nick Cleggs and Jack Dorsey of the universe signing the call and saying, yes, we're not going to go with more of the same in terms of algorithms, in terms of feeding our platforms with videos that are going to encourage violence and hate. And guess what? We're in 2021. We're still having the very same debate. So, I mean, it's just a, like very general question out there. Why would an initiative such as GPAI work better than any other, initiative that have been put out there so far?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the reason, actually a hard one, if I may say. But I do believe that a multi-stakeholder initiative made mainly of experts from many different disciplines with very, very diverse background, can actually somehow help putting this problem forward to the international community quite effectively, showing that something can be done in a very practical way. So we are not really suggesting policies. we're not really, but we are suggesting operational things that can be done, and in this specific realm, I think that case studies like the one that Nico was bringing forward in the climate change and in the social media governance area can really open up eyes and understand that there is not only room for regulation. Actually, let me remember, several members of GPAI are actually putting forward a regulation that are in discussion right now and will become operational shortly. Shortly means 2 years, 3 years. Europe has launched the Digital Service Act, right, for instance, that requires auditing of large tech companies. And in a sense, we are a little bit somehow bringing the work further,
sure,
just to be prepared when this will eventually
absolutely,
happen.
which I definitely get. But 2 years, 3 years is a time frame which works when it comes to regulation, not for innovation.
It's, if I may, it's not so far because already some countries, for example, France, have put in place some laws and are implementing them about extremist content. So what we are trying to do here is to go beyond this because it's an international problem. Also to go beyond whistleblowing. Whistleblowing has and is playing, as you know, an extremely important role in this. And here you have some concrete studies that are showing how we can move forward, how we can understand the phenomenon, how we can actually include those companies actually in the game, if it's a game.
Well, yeah, sure. We have one last question, and we'll definitely have to move on. Sorry, you do have a mic, and then we'll definitely have to, unfortunately, move on to the next debater. Please, your question.
Thank you. I think it's great to have the work on how can you have independent research to understand the effects of these systems, since the research is so mixed. But I'm curious, if how you think about expanding the technical advisory role in this space to look at concepts like Fukuyama's middleware and saying, what are the possibilities of allowing more algorithmic choice in the AI algorithms that systems like this offer? There's a lot of technical complexity in implementing such an idea, but I think it has merit to explore further. I'm curious how you think about it.
I don't know if I have a...
Yeah, I mean, it's a
here
little, yeah. We have a little bad experience trying to hear on stage sometimes, so that's why we're just trying to rephrase it between hours. But so anyone has an answer to the...
Sorry, but can you repeat? Because I think you've got a great point, great question. I like Dino and Raja. I have my own opinion, but since he's leading the project, please repeat this one because it's a great one.
Yeah, so I'm curious how you think about the opportunity for GPAI's social media group to inform proposals that are coming about increasing algorithmic choice, right? So Fukuyama at Stanford, for example, has written about this concept of middleware, where to say that you could require multiple algorithms to be used, for example, in recommendations, and then allow consumers to choose. But there's meaningful technical challenges in that, right? It's not enough just to write a law. How could that be done effectively while mitigating risks, right? So have you thought about that? Is that something that's on the table for future projects?
Yeah, that's certainly a good point for the future. For the moment, we have concentrated, let's say, the middle layer would be the independent expert that sets out a methodology for doing this kind of cooperative work with the social media company. Being able eventually to turn this into something that is actually operated through some service, it would be really important because, of course, in a sense, it would standardize also the kind of audit that you can do, the kind of measurement that you can do. We haven't considered it yet, but it's certain a potential outcome if we are successful in this first stage. In this first stage, actually, we would like, it's already very, very challenging to put together, let's say, a way of collaborating in a transparent way with companies with respect to a set of indicators that can be constantly monitored and can be constantly somehow give to the public opinion, to governments, let's say, crucial information to make choices about regulation, about whatever needs to be taken aware, to somehow safeguard the democratic public opinion of our countries, which is really a public good of extreme value.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry, but we'll have to call this session to an end, maybe with some conclusive remark, either from Joshua or Raja. Joshua, maybe first.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to say that in the application of AI, the innovation driven by AI in areas of social good and public goods, there's a real need for governments to step in, because there's a gap that, these innovations are important for society, but they may not be sufficiently commercially appealing according to maximizing profit. But that means that kind of innovation is not happening, or it's not happening sufficiently. And I'm hoping that the work we're doing is going to encourage governments by giving them concrete recommendations of where to go and what to start.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very, very much again, gentlemen, for your perspective and for the bold, work you're doing out there. I mean, taking on those challenges is, again, kind of bold, I think, even though it's going to require a lot of efforts in the next years to come. Of course, thank you very much. I guess they deserve some applause.